All right, get ready because today we're heading off to a place known for breathtaking landscapes and some seriously tasty food. Apparently, it's really sustainable too.
You're right, we're talking New Zealand. They're often considered a leader in, especially when it comes to their cattle farming.
Okay, I get it, but what makes them so different? Why should we even care? Like here, we mostly see those massive feedlots, and eco-friendly isn't really the first thing that comes to mind.
That's a great question, and it gets to the core of what makes New Zealand so fascinating. So, unlike many other places, they base their entire cattle industry on pasture-based farming. Imagine this rolling green hills, cows just chilling and grazing on these lush pastures. That's everyday life for cattle in New Zealand.
Sounds pretty idyllic, almost too good to be true. But does this like pasture-based utopia thing actually mean anything? Are we talking happier cows, healthier food, a healthier planet?
It's not just hype, there's actually research to back it up. First, think about animal welfare. Pasture based systems let cows act like cows, grazing, roaming around, hanging out. This means less stress, which can lead to being healthier overall, and maybe even fewer diseases.
So happier and healthier cows, got it. But what about the food? Does this grass-fed thing actually make their beef and dairy better for us?
Totally. Studies actually show that pasture raised beef is usually leaner and has healthier fat, and it often has more of those omega-3 fatty acids.
The heart-healthy ones we're always hearing about.
Exactly. Omega-3s are essential, but our bodies can't make them, so we need to get them from food, and they've been linked to like a lower risk of heart disease, a better brain, maybe even better mental health.
Okay, that's the beef. What about dairy? Does the grass-fed thing make a difference there too?
Absolutely. Milk from those cows tends to be higher in vitamins like A and E and full of antioxidants, those things that protect your cells from damage.
Okay, wow, this is making me rethink what I buy at the store. But one of the biggest problems with the way we usually raise cattle is the environmental impact, right? So how does New Zealand's system affect the environment?
This is where their approach really stands out. Since they focus on pasture-based farming, they don't need to use as much fertilizer. And get this, those pastures are naturally fertilized by the cows
Oh,
themselves.
right, their manure.
Yeah, so they don't need to use as much synthetic fertilizer, which can pollute water and add to greenhouse gases.
It's like a perfect cycle.
Oh,
And I'm guessing all that grass means they don't need to clear as much land for feed.
exactly. They depend on pastures instead of planting tons of grain, so they avoid deforestation and habitat loss, which is a huge problem in places like the Amazon rainforest.
Mm.
They clear so much land there to plant soybeans, and a lot of that ends up feeding livestock.
Wow, that's a big deal. But let's be real, cattle aren't exactly known for being good for the environment. Methane's a serious greenhouse gas, right? Doesn't that cancel out the other good stuff?
That's true, cows produce methane naturally, but research has shown that cows raised on pasture actually make less methane than those fed grain in feedlots. It has to do with what they eat, it changes the bacteria in their gut, and that affects how much methane they produce. Plus, don't forget about the pastures, they absorb carbon dioxide from the air, which helps balance out some of that methane.
So it's like they're tackling it from all angles. They've really thought about this. But I keep hearing about this term kaitiaki tanga. What is that? How does it fit into all of this?
Katiakitanga is a Maori concept. It's all about taking care of the environment for future generations. It's a huge part of New Zealand's culture and a guiding principle for their farming. It's not just about making money now, it's about making sure the land is healthy for tomorrow.
That's a beautiful idea. So it's more than just the practical side of raising cattle on pastures. It's about deep respect for the land and a long-term vision for sustainability.
Mhm.
But realistically, no system is perfect, right? What are some of the challenges they face? Are there any downsides? That's a good point. It's easy to get caught up in the image of those perfect pastures, but there have to be some downsides, right? What are some of the things people say about this model?
Yeah, it's important to look at both sides. One of the biggest criticisms is that it's not as efficient as those huge feedlots. Cows in feedlots eat mostly grain, which is packed with calories and makes them gain weight fast. But cows raised only on pastures take longer to grow big enough to sell.
So it's a trade-off then, quality over quantity. Is that a problem for New Zealand, especially
Sure.
when they're competing with everyone else?
It definitely plays a role. New Zealand's great at producing really high quality beef and dairy, but they might not be able to match the prices of countries like the US, who can just produce a lot more meat for less money.
That makes sense. And if New Zealand wants to sell more, they'd have to make sure their standards don't drop as they grow, right?
Exactly. Keeping those high standards is super important for their image. They're known for being ethical and sustainable, and if they mess up, people might stop trusting them.
It's a tough balance. What about the environmental side? We've talked about the good stuff, but are there any environmental issues New Zealand's dealing with?
There are always challenges when it comes to farming and the environment. One thing they're facing is how grazing affects water quality. When it rains, runoff from the pastures can carry stuff like nitrates into rivers and streams, which can be bad for the ecosystem.
Right, because even if they're trying to do the right thing, it's important to watch out for any unintended consequences. Are there other environmental concerns about their cattle farming?
Another challenge is soil compaction. When cows graze in the same spot over and over, the ground can get packed down, especially when it's wet. That makes it hard for water to soak in and for plants to grow.
So it's not as simple as just letting the cows wander around. There's a real science to managing those pastures.
Exactly. A lot of farmers in New Zealand are now using rotational grazing. That means they move their cattle between different fields to avoid overgrazing and keep the soil healthy.
So it's always changing and adapting. We've talked about the challenges, but what about the good stuff? What are some new and innovative things New Zealand is doing in their cattle industry?
New Zealand is doing a lot of research and development in agriculture. They're always looking for better ways to farm, make things more efficient, and of course, be more sustainable. One exciting area is breeding programs.
What are they trying to breed for?
They're looking for things like disease resistance, being able to handle heat, and efficient grazing. For example, they've developed breeds that are better at turning grass into milk or meat, which can increase how much they produce without needing more resources.
It's like they're using science to improve every single part of the process, from the cows to the land itself. What about other ways they're using technology?
They're all over it. They're pioneers in precision agriculture, using things like GPS-guided tractors to be super accurate with fertilizer and pesticides, so they use less and reduce waste. They're also using sensors and data to keep track of how healthy the pastures are, figure out the best grazing patterns, and even monitor the health of each animal.
Wow, it's like they're thinking of everything. But all of this must be expensive. Who's paying for it all?
You're right. Research and technology don't come cheap. This is where the government comes in, with support and funding.
So it's not just the farmers on their own. There's a bigger effort from the whole country.
Absolutely. The New Zealand government gets how important their agriculture is, not just for them, but for the whole world. They've put a lot of money into research, they give farmers incentives to farm sustainably, and they're showcasing their model globally.
That's amazing. It sounds like they consider sustainable agriculture a top priority for their entire nation.
Exactly. It's like they've created this system where everyone works together, farmers, scientists, the government, everyone. It's very collaborative.
It makes you think, could this work in other places too?
Yeah.
Places that are struggling with how to produce food ethically and sustainably. Could New Zealand be an example for them?
That's the big question. While New Zealand is definitely successful, you have to remember that every country is different. The climate, the land, the economy, the culture, it's all different.
So there's no single solution, but they're showing what's possible.
Right. New Zealand gives us a lot to think about when it comes to sustainable agriculture. They're proving that you can make incredible food while still respecting the planet, the animals, and making a living.
It's about finding that sweet spot, meeting our needs now without ruining things for future generations. What impressed you the most about New Zealand's story?
For me, it's a good reminder that sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected places. New Zealand's a small country, but they've created this amazing model for sustainable agriculture. It's pretty inspiring.
It really makes you consider where your food comes from and how it affects everything. What are some things we can all take away from this, even if we don't live near those beautiful green pastures?
That's a great question. One thing that stuck with me is their long-term thinking. They're not just thinking about making money now, but about the future. They want to protect their land for the next generation.
Thinking about the legacy you leave behind, I like that. How about you? What's your biggest takeaway from all of this?
You know, it's easy to get overwhelmed by all the bad news about the environment and our food, but New Zealand shows us that there's hope. They've shown that we can do things differently, that we can make food in a way that's good for everyone and everything. We don't have to settle for how things are. We can always try to be better.
It's all about making things better.
Right.
We don't have to wait for some perfect solution to start making changes.
Exactly. Every little thing counts. Even small changes in our own lives can make a difference.
So what can we do as consumers, besides just buying grass-fed, which can be kind of pricey?
You're right. It's not always easy or affordable, but one big thing is food waste. We waste a ridiculous amount of food globally, something like a third of everything we produce.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's crazy. And think about all the resources that go into that food, the land, water, energy, all wasted.
Yeah, I've definitely thrown out my fair share of leftovers.
We all have. But even little things help. Planning your meals, using up leftovers, composting scraps.
All good tips. And if we can swing it, supporting companies that are trying to be sustainable, even if their stuff costs a bit more.
Absolutely. Where you spend your money makes a difference. And don't underestimate just staying informed. Know where your food comes from. Ask questions. Support those organizations doing good work for a sustainable food future.
It's about realizing that our choices have an impact. This whole deep dive has really got me thinking. New Zealand's way of doing things, even with its challenges, shows what you can do with innovation, collaboration, and respect for the land. It's inspiring to see that you can make delicious food and care for the planet at the same time, for ourselves and for the future.
Well said. It's all about finding that balance, meeting our needs now, but not messing it up for the generations after us. New Zealand shows us that a more sustainable and delicious future is possible, and that's definitely something to work towards.
Couldn't agree more. This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. Who knew cows and sustainability could be so interesting? Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep learning.